The last kiss. The evening was cool and quiet. A crescent moon hung lazily in the sky, its dim glow casting soft shadows across the driveway. I'd parked my car in the shadows earlier, intentionally. I sat there, staring through the windshield, the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest. I should have been working late as usual, but something, call it intuition, call it the whisper of a deeper truth, urged me to come home early. And I saw her, Elena, my wife of 8 years, standing under the porch light, her auburn hair shimmering like it did when we first met. But she wasn't alone. She was standing too close to him. Mark, my so-called best friend. His hands were on her waist, her fingers brushing his cheek as she leaned in and kissed him right there in my driveway. My driveway. It wasn't a passionate kiss, nor was it hesitant. It was familiar, like this was just another moment in a long series of stolen evenings, the kind of kiss that told me I had been the outsider in my own marriage for far longer than I realized. A lesser man might have burst out of the car, screaming, fists flying, but I wasn't a lesser man, not anymore. That kind of response would be messy, emotional, reactive. No, I wasn't going to let them win like that. They had to feel what I felt. They had to suffer. The plan. I didn't confront Elena that night. Instead, I slipped back into my car and drove off, taking the long route to nowhere. By the time I came home, she was asleep, and I slipped into bed beside her like nothing was wrong. But my mind was already working overtime. Over the next week, I became the perfect husband. I brought her flowers just because. I booked us dinner at her favorite restaurant. I laughed at her jokes and asked about her day. She smiled more, her guard dropping, and in the background, I was building my plan. The first step was setting up Mark. He owned a small tech company, and I had access to more of his personal information than I should have. Passwords he drunkenly shared during poker nights, emails he sent from our shared Wi-Fi when he visited. Mark was careless, too trusting, and I was about to exploit every weakness he had. The execution. I started by hacking into Mark's email. It wasn't hard. His password was his dog's name and birth year. Classic rookie mistake. Within hours, I had everything, his finances, his calendar, even a string of emails with Elena confirming their next lunch date. The audacity of it burned like acid in my veins. Then I found something even better. Mark was under investigation by the IRS for some creative accounting. Not enough to ruin him yet, but it was enough for me to twist the knife. Next, I worked on Elena. She was on edge when I suggested a weekend getaway to the mountains. Just us. I said, smiling warmly, "We've both been so busy. It'll be nice to reconnect." She hesitated but agreed. It was the first time in years she didn't seem excited about the prospect of alone time with me. She was distracted, her mind clearly elsewhere. Mark, no doubt. I packed the bags, making sure to bring the sleek black suitcase I hadn't touched in years. It contained everything I'd need to put the final stages of my plan into motion. The mountains. The cabin I rented was secluded, nestled deep in the woods with no neighbors for miles. Elena seemed uneasy when we arrived. "It's so quiet," she said, peering out the window at the dark forest. "Peaceful," I corrected, wrapping my arms around her. She stiffened under my touch. "Let's make dinner," I said, changing the subject. Over the next 2 days, I played the part of the doting husband. We hiked scenic trails, shared bottles of wine by the fireplace, and watched old movies on my laptop. Slowly, she began to relax. On the third night, I made my move. After dinner, I poured her a glass of red wine, lacing it with just enough of the sleeping powder I'd purchased online to knock her out for a few hours. She sipped it slowly, oblivious. Within 20 minutes, she was slumped on the couch, her breathing steady. "Sleep tight," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I grabbed my phone and sent Mark a text from her number. "Emergency. Meet me at the cabin. Come alone." The confrontation. Mark arrived just after midnight, parking his car at the edge of the driveway. He didn't even knock, walking straight into the cabin like he owned the place. "Elena?" he called out, his voice low. "Where are you?" "I'm right here," I said, stepping out of the shadows. The look on his face was priceless, pure shock. quickly replaced by poorly masked fear. "Tom, what are you doing here?" "This is my cabin," I said calmly. "The real question is, what are you doing here?" He opened his mouth, searching for an excuse, but nothing came. I didn't give him time to recover. "You've been sleeping with my wife," I said, my voice eerily steady. "Lying to me, betraying me, and you thought you could just walk in here like nothing's wrong?" "Tom, He hesitated, but the cold steel of the gun I pulled from my waistband convinced him otherwise. He dropped into the armchair, his hands raised in surrender. "Look, I'm sorry," he stammered. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean to." "Save it," I snapped. "You think I want an apology? Do you think that's going to fix anything?" I stepped closer, towering over him. "You ruined my life, Mark, so now I'm going to ruin yours." The fallout. By the time Elena woke up the next morning, Mark was gone. So was every shred of his dignity. I'd sent a series of damning emails from his account to both his wife and his business partner, exposing his affair and his financial misconduct. The cherry on top, a carefully crafted email to the IRS, complete with incriminating evidence of his fraudulent activities. Mark's life imploded within days. His wife left him, taking their kids and half his assets. His business partners ditched him, and the IRS froze his accounts pending investigation. He tried to call me to beg for mercy, but I'd blocked his number. Elena, of course, was devastated. She spent days crying, unable to reach Mark and too afraid to confront me about what had happened. I let her stew in her guilt, waiting for her to break. When she finally did, it was almost pathetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered one night, her eyes red and swollen. "I made a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "No, Elena, a mistake is forgetting to turn off the oven. What you did was a choice, over and over again." "I'll do anything," she pleaded. "We can fix this. Please." I looked at her, the woman I once loved, and felt nothing but disgust. "We're done," I said coldly. "You can keep the house. I don't want it anymore." The new beginning. The divorce was quick and painless. Elena didn't fight for anything except the house, and I was more than happy to leave her to it. By the time the ink dried on the papers, I'd already moved into a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. Mark, I heard through the grapevine, was still trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. He'd lost everything, his family, his business, his reputation. It wasn't enough to undo the pain he caused me, but it was a start. As for me, I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the weight of a marriage that had been dead long before I realized it. I threw myself into my work, my hobbies, and eventually into the arms of someone new, someone who saw me for who I was and loved me for it. And every time I looked out at the city lights, I smiled, because in the end, I'd made sure that neither of them would ever forget me or the consequences of crossing me. The end.